This video serves as a treatment for a complete rewriting of the Star Wars sequel trilogy, beginning with Episode 7, Echoes of the Force. The core philosophy of this project is to create a direct, unified narrative that builds logically upon the events of the original trilogy, providing a sense of meaningful victory and clear stakes for the original heroes while introducing new, compelling threats. These pages are not finalized screenplays. They are detailed narrative outlines and scene scripts intended to capture the tone, pacing, and core thematic beats of the story. While they include dialogue, there is immense room for additional scenes, deeper character interactions, and further military and political world-building to be explored in a full script. The goal is to restore the core themes of balance in the Force and rebuilding the Republic, using the rich tapestry of the Star Wars expanded universe to craft a sequel era worthy of the Skywalker saga. Star Wars. Episode 7, Echoes of the Force. Peace has settled uneasily across the galaxy. The New Republic struggles to unite worlds long divided by war and fear. From the forgotten reaches of the Outer Rim, whispers speak of a reborn empire led by the brilliant but merciless Grand Admiral Thrawn. As the galaxy heals, Luke Skywalker builds a new Jedi temple, seeking to restore harmony between light and dark. But the Force stirs with echoes of Anage long forgotten, an ancient power awakening beyond the Republic's sight. On the distant world of Dathomir, Thrawn forges an unholy alliance with the Great Mothers, whose dark magic promises the rise of a new empire, forged from the shadows of the old. The cavern was a gash in the world, a place where the veil between life and death had been worn thin as ancient parchment. The air was a physical presence, heavy with the cloying sweetness of decay and the sharp, metallic tang of ozone. It was cold, a deep, marrow-chilling cold that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the absence of life. Grand Admiral Thrawn stood motionless at its heart, a statue of white and gold in the perpetual twilight. His new uniform, ornate and severe, was a declaration of sovereignty, a crown woven from thread and ambition. The years in the unknown regions had not aged him. They had condensed him, forging the lean tactician into a broader, more physically imposing figure, his mind a razor's edge honed by isolation and absolute command. Before him, the three Great Mothers began their chant. They were not merely old, they were ancient. Their bodies so withered they seemed like artifacts pulled from the crimson soil itself, draped in robes that were little more than spectral webs. Their voices rose, a low, guttural incantation in a tongue that predated star charts and hyperlanes. It was a sound that did not so much fill the silence as replace it, a vibration that crawled up the spine and settled in the teeth. Thrawn's red eyes, luminous in the gloom, missed nothing. He observed the ritual with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist studying a rare biological process. This was not superstition to him. It was a new variable in a grand galactic equation. As the chant swelled, the air itself began to change. It grew thick, resistant. Then, from the cracks in the stone floor and the damp cavern walls, it emerged, a luminous green mist. It was not a vapor, but an entity, sinuous and intelligent, coiling from the shadows like a nest of serpents awakened. The mist flowed towards the walls of the cavern, and as it did, Thrawn's gaze followed. The walls were not walls at all, but a honeycomb of open stone burial caskets, thousands upon thousands of them, stretching up into a darkness so profound it seemed to be a solid thing. The green energy washed over them, and a low, grinding rumble began to build, the sound of a mountain waking from a long slumber. One by one, then, in a terrifying synchronized wave, the stone caskets lifted from their niches, hovering in the air, defying the gravity that had held them for millennia. The chant reached a fever pitch, and with a thunderous, simultaneous crack that echoed like the shattering of a world, every stone lid flew back. From the darkness within, they climbed. They were the Night Sisters of Dathomir. But the stories had not done them justice. Their bodies were desiccated, skin pulled taut over bone like leather left too long in the sun. Yet they moved with a terrible, unified purpose that was more machine than mortal. They wore the tattered remnants of ceremonial garb, stitched with bones and feathers that crumbled at the edges. But their eyes were empty sockets filled with a faint, sickly green light, the direct and flawless imprint of the Great Mother's will. They did not speak. They did not breathe. They simply stood in perfect, unmoving ranks, a legion of the dead given dreadful animation. An army that felt no pain, knew no fear, and required no sustenance. The ultimate instrument of war. One of the Great Mothers, her voice a dry rustle, turned her head. The movement was slow, unnatural, the creak of a dead tree in the wind. The children of Dathomir answer the call, Grand Admiral. Their flesh is dust, but their magic is eternal. They are yours to command. Thrawn finally moved. He took a single, deliberate step forward, his polished boot landing without a sound on the mossy stone. His hands remained clasped behind his back as his gaze swept over the silent, staring legion. A cold, calculated smile touched his lips, an expression of pure intellectual satisfaction, devoid of warmth or malice. It was the look of a master artisan beholding a perfectly crafted tool. A perfect strategy requires a flawless instrument, he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the residual hum of the magic, each word precise and measured. He gestured with a white-gloved hand toward the countless glowing eyes. These will not require motivation. They will not question orders. They will not require sustenance or rest. They require only direction. He paused, letting the absolute silence of the army emphasize his point. The New Republic believes they face a military campaign. They prepare for fleets and soldiers, for the predictable logistics of mortal men. They have yet to understand that they are fighting an idea, the idea of order, imposed by a will that does not yield. He turned back to the Great Mothers, his crimson eyes locking with their glowing green orbs. Their first mistake was believing the past was dead. Their second will be believing this is a war they can win with blasters and starfighters. The lead Great Mother offered a thin, skeletal smile in return, a terrifying sight. The magic is strong. The galaxy will remember the power of Dathomir and tremble. The galaxy, Thrawn replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper that nonetheless carried through the vast cavern, will be remade. And this is the first stroke of the brush. As the chant of the Great Mothers began anew, rising to a crescendo that made the very air vibrate and the stone tremble, the camera, as if overwhelmed by the sheer wrongness of the spectacle, cut away. But the image of those thousands of glowing green eyes remained, burning in the darkness, a silent, searing promise of the hell that was to come. The alliance was forged, the price of power had been paid, and the galaxy would soon be presented with the bill. The wind on Ossus carried the scent of stone dust, a hardy, purple-blossomed flower that clung to the cliffsides. It was a clean, sharp smell, the smell of new beginnings. The plateau was busy with the gentle, hard-working hum of repulsor lift droids, their metal bodies shining in the golden light of the setting twin suns as they moved huge, old stone blocks into place. The calls of the leather-winged zephyr birds echoed in the canyons below. A calm song to the work of starting over. At the center of it all, a single person moved with a grace that was both like a soldier and like someone in deep thought. Luke Skywalker, his face marked with a peace that had been difficult to earn, held his green lightsaber in a steady hand. The blade hummed, a sound of pure, focused energy. He was not just building, he was shaping, talking with the stone. With a series of smooth, exact movements, he guided a giant slab of granite, his will the only crane that mattered. His lightsaber flashed, not in a fight, but in making something new, cutting through the rock as if it was soft clay, leaving behind smooth, perfect seams that fit together without any mortar. This was the start of his temple. Not just a building, but a thought, a promise. A few yards away, Grogu sat cross-legged on a flat rock, his big, expressive eyes fixed on Luke. The child's own three-fingered hands were raised, copying the Jedi Master's motions. In front of him, a single, pebble-sized stone shook, lifted a shaky inch from the ground, wobbled a lot, and then dropped with a soft clink. A series of happy, questioning beeps came from R2-D2, who was parked close by. The astromech showed a faint, shimmering picture of the finished temple. Tall spires reaching for the sky, a sign of hope against the huge emptiness of space. Luke paused, a small smile touching his lips as he watched his first student. The force here was a gentle, humming feeling, moving through the stone, the air, the very light. It was balance. It was peace. It was everything he had fought for, and then it was gone. The smile left his face. His hands, which had been so steady, fell to his sides. The stone he had been floating with his mind settled softly onto the base, its landing almost no sound. The calm focus in his eyes broke, replaced by a deep, worrying dread. It was a feeling that twisted in his gut, cold and known. It was the shadow he had felt in the Emperor's throne room, the darkness that had stuck to his father. He wasn't looking at the temple anymore. He was looking inside himself and then out, towards the line where the sky meets the land, where the twin suns colored the sky orange and purple. Father. The word was a whisper taken by the wind, a secret told to the empty air. I'm scared. The quiet that answered was total. The wind stopped. The zephyr birds went silent. Even the hum of the repulsor lifts seemed to become a far-away memory. For a long time, there was only Luke and the heavy weight of his fear. Then, the light changed. A soft blue glow began to come together behind him, a gentle light that threw no shadow. It took shape among the half-built stones, a figure that was both see-through and solid. The form of Anakin Skywalker stood there, not as the scarred monster in black armor, but as the man he could have been, a bit worn, sad, but at peace. His presence was a warmth that fought the sudden cold in Luke's soul. He stepped forward, his feet with no boots making no sound on the rocky ground. You've built so much. Luke, Anakin's voice was like a sound from far away, full of a pride that was heavy with regret. More than I ever could. More than the old order ever dreamed. Luke turned, the fear still clear in his eyes. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. The galaxy, it's still broken. We have peace, but it feels weak. The Jedi, they were supposed to be peacekeepers, not old stories. Not signs on a stand to be knocked down. The order I knew fell because we forgot compassion, Anakin replied, his gaze looking through Luke into a hurtful past. We became so stuck on the rules, on power, on the fear of the dark side that we forgot why we served. You haven't. You look at that child, he said, pointing towards Grogu, and you see a student, not a new member. You see a life. That is why you are ready. That is why this temple will not fall. Grogu looked up from his pebble, his big ears moving. His dark eyes got wide, showing the calm blue light of the ghostly visitor. He cooed, a soft, wondering sound, and tilted his head. There was no fear in him, only a deep, old curiosity. A small spark of knowing for this familiar presence that felt of stars and sadness and being saved. But fear still finds me, Luke insisted, his voice tight. I feel it getting bigger again out there. A coldness, a plan. It's not the wild anger of the Sith. It's something older, more patient. Anakin's ghostly form seemed to become more real, his gaze getting sharper as if he could see across the many light years. He felt it too, the chilling, careful presence of Thrawn, a planner who used armies and dark magic with the same cool precision. Then you will face it, Anakin said, his tone strong, yet soft. As a Skywalker, remember, Luke, the Force is balance. Light and dark, making and breaking. But balance does not mean peace. Sometimes balance must be fought for. The words settled over Luke, a heavy cloak of duty and comfort. He gave a slow, serious nod, taking in the lesson. As his father's ghost began to fade, turning into bits of blue light taken by the night wind, Luke turned back to his work. He reached out, and his lightsaber flew from the ground where he had dropped it, hitting his palm with a solid sound. He pressed the switch. The green blade came out again, a bold signal in the coming dark. He started his work again, cutting and piling the stones. His movements now filled with a stern resolve that had taken the place of his earlier peace. The temple would be built. It had to. It was then, as the last bit of the suns disappeared, that a soft, urgent beeping came from his belt. He put his lightsaber away, the blade going back in with a hiss, and lifted the comlink to his ear. "Luke, it's Leia." Her voice was the steady, controlled tone of a general and a princess, but he had known her his whole life. He heard the hidden strain under the surface, the small shake of alarm she would never let anyone else see. "We need you to come in. Something's happening." Luke's face grew tight. The storm he had felt coming was no longer far away. It was here. He looked at Grogu, who was now watching him with wide, worried eyes, then back at the star-filled black of the sky. "I'm on my way." The round command room of New Republic headquarters on Chandrila was filled with a quiet but deep tension. Its large, clear windows showed a beautiful, calming view of Hana City's shining towers and the peaceful blue waters of the Silver Sea. This was a sharp difference to the dark mood inside. The room buzzed with the low, steady sound of active holographic projectors. Their pale blue light made the faces of the galaxy's leaders look worried and serious. The New Republic symbol, marked on the central platform, seemed less like a sign of winning and more like a wall against a coming, unseen danger. Mon Mothma stood at the front of the main holotable. Her hands were held together tightly in front of her. She was a picture of diplomatic calm under great stress. To her right, Leia Organa stood very straight. Her arms were crossed. Her eyes, the same eyes that had faced a Death Star, moved over the tactical display with a general's cold logic. Across from her, Hera Syndulla leaned forward. Her knuckles rested on the cool surface of the table. Her face was that of a pilot looking for a way through a dangerous asteroid, field with no clear path out. The display itself was a swirling map of the outer rim. It showed a huge area of known sectors and disturbing empty spaces. Spread across it like a rash of red static were the newest reports. They told of strange fleet movements, broken supply lines, and whispers from the edge of space about a returning, united Imperial will. Into this war council, a new person entered, almost unseen by the politicians and officers. Luke Skywalker moved with a quiet importance. His simple Jedi robes were a strong contrast to the sharp military uniforms. Grogu, resting in his hover pram, made soft sounds as R2-D2 followed faithfully behind them, his single eye moving to look around the room. They moved into a darker space near the wall. They were watchers more than members, but their coming changed the feel of the room. It was a small shift in the Force that made Ezra Bridger, who had been standing near the display, turn his head. Ezra, wearing a standard New Republic flight jacket that still seemed a little wrong on him, stood at the center of the briefing. The holographic light shone on his face, showing new lines of stress and old marks from his long time away. "When we left Peridia," Ezra began, his voice steady but carrying the weight of memory, "Thrawn did not just retreat. He did not just run. He vanished. It was a tactical erasure. No leftover engine signs, no stray comms chatter, no field of broken ship parts. It is as if the Chimera and its whole fleet were wiped from the star charts." He moved his hand, and the holo display moved closer to a group of faint, strange energy signs flashing along forgotten hyperlane paths. "We have been following these. Low-level energy jumps, matching with something. But it is not Imperial technology. It is something else." He took a breath, the memory clearly uncomfortable. There were others with him on that ship. Not Imperials. 3 beings. They called themselves the Great Mothers. Thrawn treated them not as underlings but as allies, equals, and they used a kind of power, a force magic, but not like anything I have ever seen or felt. It was older, wilder. A low talk moved through the gathered officers. The word magic felt wrong in a room built on logic and laser cannons. Hera Syndulla stood up straight, her voice cutting through the whispers. You were saying Thrawn has witches now? The doubt in her tone was softened by a deep trust in the man before her. Ezra met her look, his own certainty firm. I do not know what they were, Hera, but I have stood near the dark side. I have felt its anger, its pull. This was different. It was basic, like the universe itself was being forced to their will. Mon Mothma's face, usually a mask of calm diplomacy, became hard. If Grand Admiral Thrawn has indeed found a new strange source of power, we cannot ignore it. Our answer must be made for a threat we do not yet fully know. It was Leia who spoke next, her voice thoughtful, her mind moving through years of political and historical information. The name Great Mothers. It sounds known. It is in old intelligence reports from the Clone Wars. She turned her head a little toward Hera. Was not Dathomir the homeworld of a group of Force wielders? The Night Sisters? Hera nodded, her face grim. It was. Led by a woman named Mother Talzin. They used green energy, death magic, fake visions. They were a strong power until General Grievous and his droid army destroyed them. She paused, her head tails moving a little. Or so the official reports said. Mon Mothma and Leia exchanged a look that said much, a silent talk of shared fear and dark understanding. If these Great Mothers are the last of that line, Mon Mothma stated, her voice low, then the planet Dathomir may not be as dead as our records say. A heavy quiet fell on the room. The holographic map flickered, and as if called by their talk, the red, evil circle of Dathomir glowed into clearer view, floating in the display like a blood-filled eye opening in the dark. Ezra's voice was almost a whisper, but it reached every corner of the quiet room. Then maybe that is where he went. As the weight of this idea settled, a protocol droid, shining in bright gold, stepped nervously into the command center from a side door. "Oh my," C-3PO said, his eyes taking in the sad group. "I do apologize for the interruption, but the air reset of the diplomatic rooms has been finished. And I was told to..." He was cut off as R2-D2. Seeing his old friend, let out a series of excited, talking beeps and whistles. The astromech moved away from Luke's side and quickly rolled across the smooth floor, his round head turning, almost hitting C-3PO's legs. "R2! Do watch where you are going," 3PO scolded, stepping back. "This is a very important strategic meeting, not a landing bay. Your excitement is very badly timed." The short normal talk was a bit of everyday life in a sea of fear, a memory of a friendship that had lasted through many fights. It broke the tension just enough for the leaders to breathe. Hera Syndulla took the moment, her voice firm and sure. "Wait, we have an Imperial in a cell. Moff Gideon. Why do we not question him? If anyone in this galaxy knows the shape of Imperial leftover power, it is him. He might know something." Leia's look moved from the hologram of Dathomir to the faces of her friends, her family. Her jaw set in a line of pure will. "Then that," she said, her voice allowing no argument, "is where we will start." The central holotable turned off with a soft sound, the evil red circle of Dathomir disappearing and throwing the room into a deeper, more ordinary shadow. The gathered officers, their faces marked with a new layer of worry, started to walk out. Their low talks were a worried hum. Leia, Hera, and Mon Mothma moved as one toward the door, their heads close together in a private group. Their voices were too low to hear, but the grim set of their shoulders said much. Ezra Bridger stayed. He stood alone by the now dark table, one hand resting on its cool surface, as if he could still feel the ghost heat of that red world. His mind was far away, lost in the cold memories of the Chimera's bridge, the chanting of the Great Mothers, and the feeling of space folding away into the unknown. So lost was he that he did not hear the soft step behind him until a calm, clear voice broke his thoughts. "You have seen things few could describe," the voice said. Not as a question, but as a simple, deep statement of fact, and lived to tell it. Ezra turned, his body tightening with a fighter's instinct sharpened by years of hiding. His hand moved toward his belt, not reaching for a weapon that was not there, but as a reflex, a memory of danger. The man before him was younger than he had thought, with a calm that seemed to spread out, quieting the air around them. But Ezra did not see the man. He felt him. A center in the Force, a sun-warmed pool of deep, still power. "You are a Jedi," Ezra breathed, the word feeling both strange and known on his tongue. Luke Skywalker gave a small, almost amused nod, a faint smile touching his lips. "So are you." Ezra blinked, the simple statement hitting him with the force of a great wave. He had been Kanan's student, a rebel, a survivor. To be called a Jedi so plainly by another, it was a recognition he had not known he was waiting for. He studied Luke's face, his senses reaching out through the Force, looking for the strict rules of the Old Order, for the shadow of the Inquisitors. He found none of it. "Have not met many of us lately," Ezra finally said, the understatement feeling huge and heavy. Luke's smile faded, replaced by a look of shared, serious understanding. "There are not many left." They stood in silence for a long moment, two survivors from different battlefields of the same endless war. The ghosts of their teachers and the weight of their title hung between them. Then a soft coo broke the stillness. Grogu's hoverpram moved forward, the child's large, dark eyes fixed on Ezra with open interest. Ezra tilted his head, his own tension melting away as he looked at the little one. A real smile, the first in a long time, spread across his face. "He is strong. I can feel it." "My first student," Luke said, warmth returning to his voice. "His name is Grogu." Ezra knelt, bringing himself to the child's level. He felt the huge old presence within the small form, a deep well of unused possibility. "You have a big future ahead of you, little one," he said softly. Grogu babbled. A series of happy, questioning sounds, and one tiny, three-fingered hand reached out toward Ezra. The move was one of pure, open trust. "He likes you," Luke observed, the faint smile returning. Ezra looked back at Luke, seeing him clearly now. Not as a legend, not as the last Jedi, but as a man trying to build something new from the broken pieces. "You are different," Ezra said. "Not like the masters I knew." "Neither are you," Luke replied, his look knowing. "Maybe that is why we're still here." It was all that needed to be said. A quiet understanding passed between them, a recognition of a shared path made not by old rules but by loss, hope, and the stubborn will to protect what little light remained. R2-D2, who had been quietly watching with C-3PO, let out a series of happy chirps, breaking the moment. Luke looked toward the main doorway just as it slid open with a hiss. Han Solo walked in, a familiar confidence in his step, despite the seriousness of the place.
Chewbacca stood behind him, his large presence immediately filling the room.
"If this meeting runs any longer," Han announced to no one in particular, "I am declaring war on the food service. I have seen Hoth Tauntauns with better blood flow than the coffee in there." He stopped suddenly, his rogue's grin instantly widening into something real and relieved when his eyes landed on Luke. "Well, I will be damned." "Skywalker!" "Han," Luke said, his own smile growing. They closed the distance and held each other's arms, a grip that was both a hello and a reaffirmation. It was a rare, unspoken respect between two men who had saved each other too many times to count. Chewbacca let out a happy roar that shook the lights and immediately wrapped Luke in a Wookiee hug that lifted him off the floor. Luke laughed, a real free sound as he patted Chewie's furry arm. Grogu chirped and spun his pod in a circle, amused by the show. Leia turned from her talk with Mon Mothma and Hera. Her stern face softened into something tender and tired when she saw her brother held by their family. She moved to join them. "Feels like the old days," she said, her voice thick with feeling. Han let go of Luke and shot Leia a wry look. "Yeah, except now the old days have a lot more meetings and a lot fewer working blasters." Luke's gaze moved over them all, his sister, his brother-in-law, his oldest friends. His face became serious again as he looked back at the dark holotable. "Let us hope they still end with winning." For a long, silent moment they stood together. Luke, Leia, Han, Chewbacca, Grogu, and R2-D2. The galaxy's fragile hope brought together once more. The command center was empty now, save for them, the air still and quiet. But in the mind's eye, the faint, ghostly afterimage of Dathomir's red glow seemed to stay on the darkened display. The Chimera floated in the empty space above Dathomir, a sword of durasteel aimed at the galaxy's throat. The planet below was a storm of blood-red clouds and snapping green energy, a good seat for the new power in orbit. On the ship's bridge, the lights were a deep, warning red. The usual Imperial gray was covered with new Dathomiri marks that seemed to move in the dim light, as if carved into the metal by an unnatural fire. At the center of this scene of planned threat stood Grand Admiral Thrawn, his hands held behind his back, a picture of perfect calm. Behind him, the three great mothers were a display of old power, their lack of movement more disturbing than any spoken threat. Further back, hidden in the darker shadows near the window, stood Enoch. His armored body was a quiet promise of hurt, his gold mask catching the hellish light of the world below. A low hum filled the bridge as the main holoprojector lit up. One by one, the shaky blue forms of 10 Imperial officers appeared in a ghostly circle around Thrawn. The air buzzed with more than just machine noise. It buzzed with shock, disbelief, and a newly lit, hungry hope. The first to speak was Admiral Hux, his holographic form sharp and stiff, his face a mask of stunned surprise. "Grand Admiral Thrawn?" he blurted, the title both a greeting and a question. "The plans? We thought you were gone in the unknown regions." "For good," Thrawn's chin raised a little, his glowing red eyes moving over the gathered pieces of his old empire. "Guesses are what people make when they are not ready, Admiral," he answered, his voice a calm, cold difference to Hux's shocked tone. "Only people with no vision are truly gone." A more careful voice, that of Captain Pelion, cut through the tension. "And the reports we have been getting from the Outer Rim, they talk of strange powers, of friends. Are these the things you have found?" "Dathomir gives what the old Empire, with its trust in raw power and machine thinking, never saw," Thrawn stated, pointing loosely to the world outside the window. "Old knowledge. A power older than the Jedi and the Sith, and soldiers that will do what normal fleets cannot. They will not break. They will not fall back, and they will not ask why." A large figure, Warlord Vask of the Pentastar Alignment, leaned forward, his scarred face a map of old fights. "And that goal is? To hide on this dead rock? To fight a war from a burial ground?" Thrawn's lips became a thin, sharp smile. "The goal is to make the New Republic move before they are set. To make them use their power on a field I pick, at a time I choose." From another area, the image of Admiral Neiman, a strict woman known for being brutally effective, frowned. "You plan to draw them here?" "To Dathomir. It is a clear trap." "Not draw," Thrawn corrected, his tone that of a teacher talking to a smart but slow learner. "Push. There is a difference. I will show them a truth so strong, so worrying, that their own rules of action, and their fear of what they do not know, will make them move. They will come on their own, driven by a need to know, by a feeling of duty, by fear. They always do." With a press of a button, he input an order. In the middle of the holographic group, a new image flickered to life, the face of Ezra Bridger. Hux pulled back as if hit. "The Jedi, the one who vanished with you. He got away from your ship?" "He did," Thrawn said, his voice even, without anger or annoyance. It was a plain fact, and he will tell what he saw. He will talk of the Great Mothers. He will talk of the magic. The New Republic will pick apart his story. They will see it wrong as a direct and growing threat, and they will for sure send ships to look. That is the first step in a set of moves I can predict. It is a song I have heard played out many times in the stories of 1,000 peoples. He took one careful step, his look moving toward the silent Great Mothers. And Dathomir will welcome them. When the fighting is done, their fleets will be smaller, their belief hurt, and their battle plans open for me to study. Their losses will be educational. Pelion's voice was quiet, almost unwilling. "You are using him as bait." The Jedi. Thrawn's head turned slowly, his red eyes holding Pelion's hologram. Not bait, he said, the words cold and exact. Bait is a trick. I'm using him as truth. The most dangerous kind of push. The kind that makes people feel they have to do something. Warlord Vask made a low sound, moving his weight. And Bastion? The Imperial capital in hiding? Is this? Sideshow on Dathomir just for a short time. Dathomir is the first step, Thrawn confirmed. A lesson. A show of a new kind of war. Bastion waits, stronger than before, out in the unknown regions. But to make our future safe, the new Republic must first be made to give up its now. As if they had been waiting, the Great Mothers moved. A low, whispered chant started to drift onto the bridge, a sound like dry leaves blowing over rock. Outside, a huge fork of green lightning cut through the red clouds, and in its sudden bright flash, the bare frames of partly fixed star destroyers were lit up. Warships being made new not in building yards, but by waves of death magic. Thrawn watched the storm, untouched. Every win, he said softly, almost to himself, starts with someone else's error. It was then that the hologram of Octavian Grant, a clever planner from the corporate sector, spoke. Thrawn, if I can ask, what about Moff Gideon? He is still a prisoner of the New Republic. His knowledge of our old backup plans, his pride, we cannot let him give out any facts in a wrong-headed try to trade for his life. Thrawn did not even turn from the window. The problem with Moff Gideon, he stated, his voice level and final, has already been handled. Thank you, Admirals. I will take it from here. Without another word, he input a last command. The holograms of the 10 Imperial officers flickered, their faces of shock, thought, and greed stuck for a moment before they faded into nothing. The bridge was quiet again, save for the spooky whisper of the Great Mothers and the low hum of the ship. The holograms were gone. Only the never-ending green storm of Dathomir and the cold, planning look of its new master remained. The cell was a metal box lost in the clean, empty inside of a New Republic cruiser. Its only light came from one flickering panel in the ceiling that buzzed with a low electric sound. It threw long, moving shadows that seemed to scratch at the walls. The air was cold and stale, smelling faintly of electricity and fear. Tied to a chair in the middle of the room was Moff Gideon. His hands were locked in energy cuffs that let out small, sharp blue sparks, a steady, painful sign he was a prisoner. But he did not look beaten.
He sat very straight, his face a mask of cool, planned pride. The door slid open with a hiss, breaking the constant hum.
Hera Syndulla walked in first, her look as hard and sharp as a blade. Behind her was a new person, a woman who filled the room with a strong, steady feel. Commander Kayla Vex, an old soldier from the Rebel Alliance's Special Missions, and now the leader of the New Republic's Irregular Threats Division, moved with the quiet, careful steps of a hunter. Her eyes, sharp and knowing, looked over everything from the shaky light to the small twitch in Gideon's face. They were followed by 2 security officers who stood by the door, their blasters held ready. A small holo droid floating near the table turned on, showing moving lines of information. There were reports of planned attacks on Republic bases, picked up talk from old Imperial channels, and star maps pointing out strange fleet movements in the outer rim. Hera put her hands on the table and leaned forward. Gideon, we know you have been a central point organizing these attacks, watching our fleet moves. The broken pieces of the Empire are acting with a plan they should not have. Tell us, who is giving the orders now? Gideon's lips twisted into a proud, mocking smile. Orders? I follow a plan, Commander, not people. The Empire you fought is broken. Its pieces are blown away. Grand Admiral Thrawn. He let out a dry, dismissive laugh. Gone, thought to be dead. And the Jedi who got away with him? Ezra Bridger? Gone too, dead as well. There is nothing left for you to be afraid of. Only the difficult, complex work of running a government for which you are so clearly not ready. Kyla Vex did not move from her place by the wall, her arms folded. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and even, without Hera's official tone. It was the voice of someone who had spent years in the dark, taking apart Imperial operations one piece at a time. Dead or not, someone is in charge. These are not random fights. They are planned. Stop hiding behind word games and your own pride. Gideon's smirk grew as he leaned back as far as his bindings would let him, the sparking cuffs cutting into his wrists. You think this is more than it is, as you always do. The Republic will learn to handle the disorder in time, but you are not ready for it yet. You are like people trying to stop a fire with a small cup. Hera's voice became low and dangerously cold. Then start talking. Where are these forces gathering? Who is leading them? Gideon's pride held strong, a wall of self-belief. But then the door hissed open again. Ezra Bridger stepped inside. He did not walk in with anger. He just entered and stopped, his presence calm and still, his eyes, clear and direct, fixed on Gideon's. The change in the Moff was immediate and total. Every bit of his calm broke. His body went stiff, his back pushing hard against the chair. His eyes, which had been full of mocking power, opened wide in pure, total shock. The color seemed to leave his face. "You are alive?" The words came out in a choked, breaking whisper, all pride gone, replaced by a growing, frightening understanding. If Ezra Bridger was standing here, breathing, then the basic fact of his belief that Thrawn was gone was a lie. The Grand Admiral was not only alive, but he was back. Ezra took one step closer, his look not moving. "Everything you thought was gone is not," he said, his voice soft, steady, and all the more scary for it. "And you will answer for what you have done." Gideon said nothing. He just leaned back in his chair, the proud warlord replaced by a suddenly small, caught man. The high-tech bindings were now just a rule. He was trapped by a fear much stronger. The cold knowledge that he knew nothing, controlled nothing, and that the master he had thought was gone could be coming back for him at any time. Kayla Vex pushed away from the wall, her eyes meeting Hera's. "Let him sit with it," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "The fear of what Thrawn will do will break him more than any tool we have. He will break before we even need to lay a hand on him." They walked out, leaving Gideon alone in the flickering dark. The door closed with a last final hiss. A little later, the cell was quiet, save for the occasional spit of the energy cuffs and the fast, shallow sound of Gideon's breathing. He stared at nothing, his eyes scared, seeing not the metal walls of his cell but the cold, red eyes of Thrawn. The ceiling light flickered once, a long, slow dimming that threw the room into almost complete darkness for one frightening second before buzzing back to life. In that quick moment of shadow, something moved. Without any warning, Gideon's body shook and then fell forward, hanging in the bindings. There had been no sound, no fight, just one exact and killing cut. A faint red energy line showed for a brief moment across his body, the ghost mark of a lightsaber blade moving with impossible speed. Then it was gone. Moff Gideon was dead. Calm, precise, unexplained. The cell was empty. The door still closed. The security records showing no one had entered. The only sign that anything had happened at all was one thin strand of gold-red hair caught in a small flow of the recycled air, drifting slowly, smoothly, down to land on the cold metal floor. The command center of New Republic headquarters was a place of controlled chaos during the day, but at night it became a tomb of quiet tension. The bustling energy had bled away, leaving a dim, humming stillness in its wake. Beyond the vast transparasteel viewports, the distant glitter of Hana City was a peaceful, mocking contrast to the dread thickening the air inside. Holograms of outer rim sectors cast a faint, shifting glow, their silent dance of stars and trade routes a poor mask for the chaos they now represented. The low, constant thrum of machinery was the only sound, a white noise that failed to smother the anxious murmurs of the few officers on the late watch. The main holotable stood as the room's silent heart, intelligence logs scrolling in a relentless river of data points, skirmish reports, and dead ends. The peace was an illusion, fragile as glass. The illusion shattered with the sharp hiss of the main door. A young comms officer, her face as pale as her uniform, hurried inside, her boots echoing on the polished floor. She made a direct line for Hera Syndulla and Commander Kayla Vex, who were conferring in low tones over a star chart. "Sirs," the officer stammered, her voice unsteady. "The body. It is Moff Gideon." Hera and Kayla exchanged a single sharp look, a silent conversation of shared dread. Without a word, they strode forward. Ezra Bridger fell into step behind them, his expression grim. "Where?" Hera's voice was a firm, clipped demand. "Detention Block 3. The guards found him. Just like this." In the stark metal corridor of the detention block, the lights flickered with a nervous energy, casting strobing shadows that danced over the grim tableau. Inside the cell, Moff Gideon was slumped forward in the high-tech restraint chair. The metal cuffs around his wrists still spat and sizzled with futile energy. Across his chest and shoulders were 3 deep, cauterized wounds, clean, precise, and instantly fatal. The air smelled of ozone and something coppery and final. Kayla Vex stepped closer, her body tense, her hunter's eyes scanning the scene. "Those marks. A lightsaber. No blast residue, no shrapnel. But who? How?" Ezra moved to the other side of the body, his brow furrowed. He did not touch Gideon, but his presence reached out, probing the space. No saber in sight, no forced entry logged. Whoever did this moved with purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they did not want to be seen. Hera knelt, her face inches from the fatal wounds. Her expression hardened into something cold and flinty. He did not struggle. No defensive wounds on his arms. He saw his killer, and he did not even have time to react. Whoever did this knew him well, and knew exactly what they wanted. His silence. The New Republic security team had gathered, their expressions a mix of fear, confusion, and deep suspicion. An enemy they could fight was one thing. An enemy who could walk through walls and kill a high-value prisoner in the heart of a secure vessel was something else entirely. Kayla straightened up, her jaw set. "The how is a problem for our techs. The who is a problem for all of us. We have a ghost on our ship, and we need answers before this ghost decides anyone else needs to die." Ezra, his gaze still fixed on Gideon's body, spoke quietly, more to himself than the others. "This is not random. It is a statement. Someone is sending a message." Hera rose to her feet, her decision made. "Then we find them," she said, her voice cold and decisive, cutting through the fear in the corridor. "And we end this, before it spreads." Later, in Leia and Han's private quarters, the mood was different. The room was a sanctuary filled with soft light and the quiet hum of a home. On the floor, 5-year-old Jason and Jana played with small, brightly colored hover toys, their laughter a gentle, innocent counterpoint to the grim reality unfolding elsewhere. The sanctuary was breached as Hera, Kayla, and Ezra entered. The mood they carried was a palpable chill. Leia, sensing it immediately, moved without a word. "Gathering the twins close. Explain," Leia said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed her concern as she looked from Hera's grim face to Kayla's hardened one. Hera activated a portable projector. A life-sized, rotating hologram of Gideon's body materialized in the center of the room. The children fell silent. Jason's lower lip trembled, and Jana clutched her brother's hand, their small faces etched with a confusion that was beginning to shade into fear. Han stared at the hologram, his usual roguish charm replaced by a gruff, protective fury. "This is bad," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "How in the blazes are we supposed to fight whatever did this if we do not even know who or what we are fighting?" The door slid open and Luke Skywalker entered, his Jedi robes whispering against the floor. He had been summoned, and the gravity in the room told him everything. Han, without ceremony, reached into his pocket and pressed a small ring-like device into Luke's hand. It was a command token, an old Rebel Alliance sign of trust, authorizing his full involvement. No questions asked. Leia turned to her brother. "Luke, we need eyes on Dathomir. Someone or something struck Gideon right out from under us. We do not know what we are dealing with, but it is tied to Thrawn." Luke nodded, his calm demeanor a bastion against the rising anxiety. He looked at the hologram, then at the faces of his family. A direct assault would be walking into a trap we cannot even see. What if we sent a spy team first? A small, quiet presence? Right, Han agreed decisively. A full strike team would be reckless. But a small provisional spy mission. A scout run. Get in, find out who or what we are up against, and get out. No heroes. Exactly, Leia said, her gaze shifting from Luke to Hera. We will send a squad out immediately. It is time to plan our attack, but we do it with our eyes open. Han then looked down at his children, his expression softening for a brief moment amidst the storm. He knelt, putting a hand on each of their small shoulders. Jason, Jana, you listen to your mom. Stay safe. He forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. We will handle the rest. The twins held onto each other, their wide eyes reflecting the worried faces of the adults towering over them. They were too young to understand the politics, the strategy, the dark magic, but they understood fear. And as the adults began to speak in hushed, urgent tones, preparing for a mission into the heart of the unknown, the children remained huddled together, a silent portrait of innocence on the brink of a gathering war. The scout corvette Vigilant drifted in the planet's shadow, a sliver of manufactured order against the primordial chaos of Dathomir. Below, the world was a churning canvas of blood-red clouds and jagged, soul-searing green lightning. The ship's gray hull, intermittently illuminated by these electric seizures, seemed small and terribly fragile. On the bridge, Commander Kayla Vex stood with her hands clasped behind her back, a figure of grounded authority amidst the soft, anxious sounds of the 16-person reconnaissance crew. Her gaze was fixed on the main viewport, where the planet's storm seemed to stare back. Drone deployment in 5, she said, her voice low and clear, meant for the entire bridge. Focus your scans on concentrations of green energy. Necrotic life signs. Anything that doesn't belong to rock and atmosphere. We get the data, and we go home. This is a listening mission, not a fight. Understood? A murmured chorus of assent filled the bridge. Understood, Commander. External sensors told a worrying story of their own. The space around Dathomir was a soup of interference. Communication pings faltered and died, and navigational arrays spat back contradictory data. Holding its position with gentle bursts of its thrusters, the Vigilant released its sensor drones. The small winged probes shot away, their signals immediately beginning to degrade into static as they plunged into the maelstrom. One feed, flickering and unstable, showed a jagged ridgeline below. For a moment, the camera would clear, revealing landscapes of shattered rock and strange, pulsing veins of emerald light, before dissolving into electronic snow. What the Vigilant's straining senses did not see was the shape that detached itself from the storm itself. A matte black boarding pod, no larger than a coffin, fell silently through the violent atmosphere. It was a void in space, absorbing all sensor energy, leaving no signature. It struck the Corvette's hull with a dull magnetic thud that resonated through the durasteel frame. Grapples bit deep. There was a faint, almost sighing hiss as a pressurized seal was broken, and a maintenance panel on the starboard side slid inward, revealing a dark, waiting opening. The ship's internal security logs registered no breach. The intrusion was a ghost. Inside the ship, in a corridor lined with data readouts, a young tech frowned at his screen. He tapped a command, rerouting a diagnostic. "Commander!" he called out, his voice tinged with confusion. "I'm reading a brief thermal anomaly on the outer hull. A localized cold spot starboard side. It lasted less than a second. It's gone now." Kayla turned from the main drone display, her instincts, sharpened by years of fighting in the shadows, immediately on high alert. "Patch the data through. Run a full active sweep of the hull. I want every external sensor diagnostics." She motioned to 2 armed soldiers flanking the door. "With me. Let's take a look." They moved down the corridor, the hum of the ship's systems a familiar soundtrack. The lights flickered for a fraction of a second, a common enough occurrence, but tonight it felt ominous. They reached the maintenance accessway for the starboard hull. One soldier pried the panel open with a hydraulic tool. For a heartbeat, they stared into the dark, cramped space of the duct, filled with bundled cables and coolant lines. There was only the smell of ozone and recycled air. Then, a soft, almost inaudible clink echoed from the darkness. A shadow detached itself from the deeper blackness, moving with a fluid, silent grace that was utterly alien. A gloved hand pressed against a control panel on the wall. In a flash of motion, too fast to truly see, a slender blade of pure crimson energy appeared, carved a glowing arc through the panel, and vanished. The two soldiers, their weapons half raised, slumped to the floor, their armor seared open. On the bridge, a single piercing alarm blared to life. The light stuttered, then strobed white. The feed from the maintenance corridor dissolved into frantic static. Crew members scrambled from their stations, reaching for sidearms, their training kicking in even through the surge of panic. Kayla's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "All hands! Intruder alert! Defensive positions! Seal the bridge!" They moved with the disciplined speed of a practiced unit, but the predator was already among them. What followed aboard the Vigilant was a silent, brutal ballet of death. A corridor light ahead of the bridge crew extinguished, plunging them into a darkness that felt both sudden and absolute. From the shadows came the sizzling hiss of superheated metal as a reinforced blast door was sliced open from the inside in one clean, molten arc. The security team stationed behind it fell before their minds could even register the threat. Further down the passage, a soldier spun around a corner, his blaster rising in a well-practiced motion, only to be cut down mid-stride, his weapon clattering uselessly to the deck. On the bridge itself, chaos erupted as the tactical officer screamed, his console exploding in a shower of sparks that threw him back from his station in a cloud of smoke and shrapnel. Kayla fought her way through the smoke and failing systems, rallying the few survivors with sharp commands. She used pure brute force to shove a fallen support beam off a wounded comrade, her muscles straining. In the strobing emergency lights, she caught a glimpse of movement, a blur at the edge of a shattered doorway. A flash of gold-red hair, a silhouette both slight and terrifyingly potent. "Who the hell are you?" she snarled, bringing her own blaster rifle up to her shoulder. The crimson blade answered. It was a whisper and a scream. Kayla blocked a downward strike with the reinforced stock of her rifle, the impact numbing her arms to the elbows. She parried, she dodged, she threw a wounded crewman behind her, fighting with every ounce of her training, instinct, and sheer stubborn will to survive. Her attacker was a storm of controlled violence. Every movement efficient, precise, and utterly without mercy. Somehow, Kayla and 3 other survivors made it back to the bridge, their bodies aching, their lungs burning. She slammed the manual override to seal the door just as the main power failed, plunging them into the eerie, blood-red glow of emergency battery lights. The ship trembled violently around them, a dying beast. Hull integrity warnings flashed a desperate crimson across the main screen. "The emergency beacon!" Kayla yelled to the comms tech, her voice raw and shredded. "Dump the core database and all visual logs. Get it out, now!" The tech's fingers flew over the console, his face a mask of concentration and terror. "Uplink initiating!" The reinforced bridge door began to glow, first a dull orange, then a blinding white. The metal pooled and dripped inward. A silhouette stood in the molten archway, small and backlit by the carnage in the corridor. The figure took a single, deliberate step into the bridge, the crimson lightsaber in its hand casting a hellish, dancing glow across the terrified faces of the survivors. Kayla stood her ground, raising her blaster one last time. The red blade swept in a single, clinical horizontal arc. The bridge camera feed showed a flash of crimson, the view tumbling wildly, and then nothing but the empty hiss of static. Externally, the Vigilant began to spin, a slow, lifeless drift against the starfield. Its running lights died. Its engine glow faded into nothing. To any distant observer, it was just another piece of dark wreckage, another silent tomb swallowed by the eternal. Churning storm of Dathomir. The recovered data in the New Republic Command Center was a ghost of a ghost. a partial corrupted hololog, glitched and filled with static that seemed to suck the light from the room. Leia, Han, Hera, Ezra, and Luke watched the fragment in grim silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering playback. For one single horrifying instant, the static cleared, revealing a silhouette moving with impossible speed, a single, unmistakable arc of red light cutting through a corridor. Leia stared at the now dark rectangle where the horror had played out. Her jaw was clenched so tight it ached. The entire room seemed to be holding its breath, waiting on her next word, her next command that would decide the fate of thousands. "This is something different," she said, her voice tight, iron creeping into her tone. "We need to send a full fleet, now. It's time to go to war." Once again, a heavy silence fell, then broke into a ripple of tense reactions. Han stepped forward, his face grim. "Leia, you sure that's what we want?" "A full fleet? That's a big, bright target. People die in full fleets." "If we wait for more proof," Leia countered, her gaze unwavering, "there will be no proof left to find. Only more graves." Hera Syndulla moved to the holotable, her mind already shifting from grief to logistics. "We can't rush in blindly, but we can't afford to dither either. We hit them with precision, overwhelming force, but staged. We don't hand them a victory by being predictable." Ezra's voice was quiet, worried. "Whatever we send has to be ready for something we've never seen. This isn't a conventional enemy. Whoever did this knows how to get inside a ship, how to move through it, like they own it." Luke's calm voice provided a counterpoint to the rising tension. "We'll need both. Strength and restraint. Put the fleet on alert, but send a vanguard first. A spearhead we can coordinate with in real time." "I'll go with them." Han looked from Luke to Leia, his expression fraught with a father's fear. His gaze then dropped to his children, Jason and Janna, who had been playing quietly in a corner and were now watching the adults with wide, fearful eyes. He walked over and knelt before them. "You two," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "You're going to stay with Auntie Mon and the guards. You understand? You do everything they say." The twins nodded, their small hands clutching each other. Han forced a smile for them that he did not feel, a brittle mask of reassurance. From a secondary chamber, Mon Mothma's weary voice came over the comm. "The Senate will demand answers, Leia. We need a mandate. They will want collateral assessments, jurisdiction clearances." Leia cut her off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "You'll get a mandate after we make sure there's still a republic left to govern. Prepare the fleet. Call every cruiser within range." She turned, her general's mask fully in place, issuing commands like laser bolts. "Hera, coordinate logistics and staging. Ezra, you and Luke will oversee the vanguard and comms triage. Han, I need you to keep the civilian channels clear. Run interference." Her voice caught, just for a fraction of a second, on the next name, a crack in the armor. "Kayla, we honor them, and we finish this." Hera was already at a console, her fingers flying across the interface. "Understood. I'll assemble the task force. We move in 24 hours. Ezra looked at Leia, his concern for the larger picture evident. "If I go with the vanguard, if we send the fleet, we need contingencies. For the command center, for the children. If this is the trap it feels like." "Then we build contingencies," Leia said, her voice firm and protective. "But we move. As one." A flash of light erupted from the holotable as ship icons arrayed themselves into battle formations, crew rosters scrolling, flight plans solidifying into a plan of attack. The room exploded into a controlled frenzy. Orders were barked into comms, data screens lit up with new information, and the corridors outside filled with the purposeful, thunderous movement of a military machine awakening for war. Han scooped up his children, their small forms disappearing from view as he carried them to safety. Leia following close behind, her eyes as hard as flint, already fixed on the storm to come. The sky above Dathomir was a wound in the fabric of space, a seething canopy of bruised purple and violent crimson, torn open by forks of emerald lightning that illuminated the nightmare below. The air itself tasted of ozone, burnt rock, and the cloying sweetness of decay. Jagged cliffs and windswept plateaus, carved by eons of magical tempests, provided a fractured stage for the battle. Across the rock, rivers of glowing green magic flowed like malevolent lava, hissing and spitting steam into the air where stray blaster bolts struck their banks. From a wide vantage, the horror of Thrawn's army was revealed in its full, terrifying scope. The Night Sister Legion stood in silent, perfect ranks, thousands strong. They were a forest of the dead, their desiccated forms clad in tattered ceremonial garb, their eyes burning with the same sickly green energy that coursed through the planet's veins. They did not fidget, they did not speak. They simply waited, a wall of ancient hatred given form. Flanking them were Thrawn's stormtroopers, their armor repainted in a stark, imposing white and gold, moving with the chilling, synchronized discipline of a machine. They were the cold, logical fist to the Night Sister's wild, necromantic hammer. Against this dread host, the New Republic forces made their landing. X-wings, their engines screaming in defiance, weaved through the storm-tossed sky, dodging lightning and laying down covering fire for the transport ships that descended like falling stars. On the ground, armored AT-RTs stomped across the rocky terrain, their blaster cannons spitting coherent energy into the advancing lines. At the heart of the Vanguard landing zone, two figures stood amid the swirling dust and clinging green mist. Luke Skywalker and Ezra Bridger ignited their lightsabers, the green and blue blades humming a song of defiance against the chaotic symphony of war. This? Ezra breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the scene, the relentless march of the undead, the precision of the stormtroopers. This isn't just a fight, it's chaos made flesh. Luke's face was a mask of calm concentration, his gaze fixed on a point deep behind the enemy lines. "Focus," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the din. "Adapt, we don't fight the chaos. We go to the source." The ground battle was a special kind of hell. Republic troopers would cut down a Night Sister with a well-aimed blaster shot, only to watch in horror as the corpse shuddered and rose again moments later, its glowing eyes locking onto a new target before rejoining the perfect, unbreakable formation. Thrawn's stormtroopers responded not with fear, but with brutal efficiency, firing disciplined volleys that could dismember the undead, slowing if not stopping their advance. A Republic AT-RT, its pilot shouting a warning, was enveloped in a whipcrack of green energy. The machine shuddered, its systems overloading, and toppled sideways in a shower of sparks. From the cover of a shattered rock formation, a furious roar answered the assault. Chewbacca, his fur bristling, leaped onto the downed walker, using its bulk as a platform. He fired his bowcaster again and again, each explosive bolt tearing a hole in a cluster of advancing stormtroopers. As a surge of necromantic energy lashed toward his position, he ducked behind the rock with a grunt, the green fire scorching the stone where he had just stood. Through the chaos, the voices of command crackled over the comms. "Vanguard, report!" Han's voice was urgent, strained through the planetary interference. "We're tracking massive energy surges from the surface, but this storm is playing hell with our sensors." "What's your status?" Luke deflected a volley of blaster fire, the bolts ricocheting harmlessly into the sky. "Surface is worse than expected, Han," he replied, his breathing even. "Thrawn's troops are disciplined, but the Night Sisters, they are the real threat. They don't fall. They just get back up. We need to reach the source of this magic." He glanced at Ezra. "I can handle the infiltration." "Ezra, cover our flanks." Leia's voice cut in, firm and reassuring. "Vanguard, you are not alone. All fleet units are providing orbital support fire on my mark. Focus on holding your positions and protecting the skimmers and wounded." A moment of static, then Han's voice returned, a muttered aside to Leia that everyone could hear. "Chewie's already making a mess of their front lines. That furry lunatic is unstoppable once he's in." As if on cue, another roar echoed from the battlefield, followed by the crump of a thermal detonator. "Rah!" Chewbacca bellowed, the explosion clearing a temporary path through a surge of undead, allowing a squad of beleaguered Republic troopers to fall back to a more defensible line. The battle raged. Republic forces fought to hold their defensive perimeter, a shrinking island of light against the tide of dark magic and Imperial discipline. Luke and Ezra became a moving spearhead, pushing forward through the maelstrom. Luke was a ghost, his green blade a blur, deflecting blaster bolts with preternatural grace, his movements guided by the Force as he carved a path. And then, Luke felt it. A presence, sharp and furious, a shard of pure, focused rage moving through the chaos with a purpose all its own. He saw it only for a moment, a flash of red gold, a streak of crimson energy that cut down both undead and stormtrooper alike with impartial, brutal efficiency. It was a whisper of danger, a predator hunting within the larger hunt, and its power radiated through the Force like a black star. The numbers are insane. Ezra shouted over the concussive blast of a nearby explosion, his blue saber deflecting a hail of blaster fire. They just keep coming. Luke's eyes remained fixed on the point where the red-gold streak had vanished, his senses stretched taut. Don't get drawn into their war of attrition. In the midst of the cacophony, the screaming engines, the roaring bowcasters, and the sizzle of lightsabers, Luke Skywalker stood for a silent moment. His entire being focused on the echo of a woman's rage, a shadow in the Force that called to him with the promise of a different kind of battle altogether. The world narrowed to a single storm-lashed plateau. The wind howled like a dying beast, whipping stinging particles of sand and rock through the air. Above, the sky was a cauldron of blackened clouds, split by continuous, silent arcs of green lightning that cast the jagged terrain in brief, ghastly relief. The very air hummed with the eerie magic of Dathomir, a dissonant chord that set Luke's teeth on edge. Their transport had set down in a relatively clear area, the engines whining into silence. Luke turned to his companion, his face grave. "Ezra, I can handle this. Stay back." Ezra Bridger nodded, his own senses bristling at the dark, focused presence that awaited them. "I'll cover your flank. Be careful. Whoever this is, they're not ordinary." He retreated to a higher vantage point, his blue lightsaber humming softly, a watchful sentinel against the larger battle still raging in the distance. Luke stood alone, his green blade casting a pool of serene light around him. He didn't have to wait long. A figure emerged from the shadows between two towering rock spires, her movements fluid and utterly silent. In her hand, a lightsaber blazed to life, but its color was unlike any Luke had seen, a flickering, turbulent red gold, like captured fire. "You don't even know me." Her voice was low, laced with a venom that felt years in the making. "But I've waited for this day. You destroyed everything I was meant to be." She lunged. Luke parried the first furious strike, the impact jarring up his arm. "Step back," he commanded, his voice calm but firm. "I don't know what you're doing here, but it doesn't have to be like this." "Doesn't have to?" She spat, circling him like a Nexu, her red gold blade leaving after images in the air. "You Jedi. You killed Palpatine. You killed Vader. You destroyed the only path I had to purpose, to power, to... Direction!" Her attacks came faster, a whirlwind of controlled fury. "I had a role to play, a destiny, and you erased it." Their sabers clashed again, a shower of sparks erupting into the howling wind. Luke defended, his movements strategic and economical, but she was fast, precise, and utterly ruthless. Her style a brutal amalgamation of formal training and Street Fighter savagery. "Who are you?" Luke asked again, his mind racing, trying to place her, to understand the source of this deeply personal hatred. "Why target me? Names don't matter," she seethed, her voice sharp enough to cut. "I was meant to serve, to enforce, to take what was needed. And you shattered that world. I am the reckoning of what you took from me." She pressed her assault, spinning and flipping with acrobatic grace, each strike a mixture of refined technique and raw, untamed anger. Luke countered, trying to reach past the wall of her aggression, to read the emotion behind it through the Force. But he found only a fortress of hate and grief. Her mental shield's formidable. "This path you're on," Luke called out, deflecting a blow aimed at his neck. "It will only destroy you." "Perhaps," she snarled, her eyes blazing with golden fire in the lightning flash. "Or perhaps it will destroy you first." "Stop," You don't have to do this. Whoever you are, it's not too late to come back. She let out a bitter, broken laugh that was swallowed by the storm. Come back? To what, Jedi? You took everything from me. My purpose, my master.
My life!
She unleashed a brutal overhead strike that Luke deflected, the force of the impact sending a tremor through the ground. Your anger doesn't have to control you, Luke insisted, his voice rising above the wind. The path you're on leads only to your own destruction. You think I care about destruction? She screamed, the raw pain finally breaking through the fury. I care about power, about reclaiming what you stole from me. They clashed again, the red gold and green blades screeching against each other. Luke pushed deeper, past the saber, past the anger, trying to find the person trapped within. Her presence in the Force was a tangled knot of shadows, fiercely guarded. His voice softened, becoming an urgent plea. I can help you. You don't have to be alone in this. You don't have to fight me. For the first time, her assault faltered. Her blade wavered, a flicker of something else. Confusion, recognition, a profound and lonely pain crossed her face. You don't know me, she whispered, the words strained, almost lost to the gale. You cannot know me. Seeing his opening, Luke pressed forward, not with violence, but with unwavering pressure, forcing her back step by step toward a wall of jagged black rock. He sought to subdue, to disarm, not to kill. She hesitated, trapped, that flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes again. But the moment shattered. With a desperate cry, she used the rock as a springboard, flipping backward and out of his immediate reach, using the cover of the storm and terrain to break visual contact. Wait! Luke shouted, frustration edging his voice. He surged forward, his saber held high. Show yourself! I can help you! A tense silence descended, broken only by the moaning wind. Then, slowly, she stepped out from behind a cluster of jagged rocks, keeping herself partially concealed. Her red-gold hair was a banner in the tempest, and her eyes were wide. No longer just with anger, but with a dawning, terrifying vulnerability. Luke closed his own eyes, shutting out the visual chaos, and reached into the Force with all his being. He reached for the truth behind the wall, for the name buried beneath the pain. Mara Jade, he said, his voice focused, calm, and impossibly gentle. The name hung in the air between them, a key turning in a lock she thought was sealed forever. Mara froze. It was as if he had struck her physically. A tremor ran through her body. The terror that flashed in her eyes was absolute. No one, not even the coldly calculating Thrawn, had ever penetrated the innermost sanctum of her identity, the mental fortress she had built to protect the last remnant of who she was. How? She whispered, her voice small and fearful, a child's voice. Her red gold saber flickered, its unstable glow wavering with her concentration. How did you? You don't have to stay in the shadows, Mara, Luke said, taking a careful step forward, his own blade lowering slightly. You don't have to let this anger define you. Her eyes, wide with fear and a tumultuous conflict, blazed once more. But the fury was different now, tinged with panic, with the terror of being truly seen. The wall was breached and she could not bear it. With a powerful, desperate surge of will, she slashed her lightsaber downward, not at him, but at the sandy ground at his feet. A cloud of superheated sand and rock erupted into Luke's face, forcing him to recoil, his free arm flying up to protect his eyes. By the time he had blinked the stinging grit away, the plateau was empty. She was gone, vanished back into the storm, as if she had never been. Only the faint, acrid scent of ozone and the memory of her terrified eyes remained. Luke stood alone, his green lightsaber casting long, dancing shadows, the name Mara Jade echoing in his mind as he turned to rejoin Ezra and the desperate fight for Dathomir. The jagged ridges of Dathomir were a slaughterhouse painted in the hellish glow of green lightning and blaster fire. The storm raged on, an unending symphony of thunder that underscored the screams of the dying and the sizzle of necromantic energy. The ground was littered with the fallen, Republic soldiers taking cover behind shattered rock. The desiccated forms of Night Sisters struck down only to stir again, and the advancing, implacable white and gold lines of Thrawn's stormtroopers. Ezra Bridger moved like a ghost through the chaos. He weaved between arcs of emerald magic, his blue lightsaber a humming blur that deflected stray bolts. His focus was on a point ahead, where Luke had vanished in pursuit of the haunting presence they had both felt. "Almost there," he muttered to the troopers around him, his voice a thread of determination in the cacophony. "Just hold the line." A sudden movement to his flank, too close and too quiet, made him spin. A figure stepped from the deep shadow of a rock overhang, a lightsaber hilt held in a ready position. The stance, the way the figure shifted its weight, it was disturbingly, intimately familiar. The figure ignited its blade. A deep, bloody crimson, shot through with unsettling veins of purple, hummed to life. "You've grown strong." "Ezra," a voice said. It was calm, mechanical, filtered through a helmet's vocoder, yet it carried a mocking echo of his own inflections. Ezra's grip tightened on his saber, his senses screaming in alarm. "Who are you?" With a soft hiss of pressurized air, the figure reached up and removed its helmet. Ezra's blood ran cold. Staring back at him was his own face. It was identical in every feature, every line, every shade. But the eyes were all wrong. They were his own hazel eyes, but emptied of all warmth, all humor, all feeling. They were the eyes of a predator, cold, ruthless, and utterly detached. Ezra staggered back a step, his mind reeling, refusing to process the impossible horror before him. "What are you?" The words were torn from him, a raw sound of disbelief and revulsion. The clone, Enoch, offered a smirk that was a perfect, chilling replica of Ezra's own, yet devoid of any true emotion. "A reflection," he stated, his voice flat. "A perfected version." "Trained for victory," Enoch lunged. Their sabers met in a shrieking cascade of sparks. From the first clash, Ezra knew he was in a fight for his life. Enoch anticipated every move, every feint, every shift in stance. He moved with Ezra's own fluid, acrobatic style, but it was amplified, sharpened to a razor's edge, stripped of any defensive hesitation. He was a mirror that showed only a killer's reflection. Enoch pressed the attack relentlessly, forcing Ezra back toward a precipice. Ezra parried a brutal slash, the impact jarring his bones. How do you know me so well?" he gasped, his breath coming in ragged pants. "The Grand Admiral is a student of art," Enoch replied, his voice still that infuriating, calm monotone. "He studies every brushstroke." With a swift, brutal combination of strikes, a move Ezra himself had perfected years ago, Enoch smashed through his defenses. A boot swept his legs out from under him, and a powerful blow from the Force sent him crashing to his knees, his lightsaber skittering from his numb fingers. Enoch stood over him, the crimson-purple blade raised for the final executioner's strike. A surge of light, a hum of pure energy. A green blade intercepted the killing blow an inch from Ezra's face. Luke Skywalker descended onto the ridge, his cloak whipping around him, his expression one of grim focus. He took in the scene in an instant. Ezra on his knees, disarmed, and his doppelganger standing triumphant. Enoch, unflinching, touched a device on his wrist. A faint, insistent beeping began, a signal calling down the wrath of the Imperial reinforcements they knew were lurking in the storm. Luke's eyes closed. He took a centering breath, his body relaxing into a state of pure receptivity. "Focus," he whispered, a reminder to himself. "The Force is with me." When the fight resumed, it was unlike anything Ezra had ever witnessed. Luke moved with his eyes completely closed, his body flowing with a preternatural grace. He was not fighting with his senses, but through them. Enoch struck with terrifying precision, his red-purple blade a whirlwind of deadly efficient motion. But Luke was already there, his green saber meeting each strike not a moment too soon or too late, deflecting, redirecting, neutralizing. It was a dance, and Luke was listening only to the music of the Force. In one seamless motion, as Enoch lunged, Luke sidestepped, his saber twisting in a disarming arc that forced Enoch to recoil. At the same time, Luke's free hand shot out, and the beeping from Enoch's wrist comm died in a fizzle of shorted circuitry. Sparks flew as their sabers clashed again and again, the echoes ringing across the ridge. Enoch for the first time began to falter. His perfect predictive style was useless against an opponent who was not thinking, but being. How? "How are you?" Enoch gasped, frustration cracking his mechanical calm. "You are strong," Luke said, his voice unwavering, his eyes still shut. He pressed his attack, his movements a perfect, flowing counter to Enoch's rigid brutality. But strength without freedom is your weakness. With a powerful, force-assisted sweep, Luke pinned Enoch's saber arm, forcing him back. For a moment it seemed over, but Enoch, with a surge of desperate strength, executed a powerful, acrobatic backflip, his boots landing with a clang on the hull of a low-flying Imperial shuttle that skimmed the ridge. He ignited a secondary device on the shuttle's hull. Its engines roared and it shot forward, disappearing into the roiling green clouds of Dathomir's storm. The sudden silence was deafening. Ezra, panting, pushed himself to his feet, his body aching. He looked at the empty sky where his mirror image had vanished. He got away. Luke opened his eyes, the deep calm receding, replaced by concern. He offered a hand, pulling Ezra fully upright. "Ezra, are you okay?" Ezra just nodded, too shaken to speak, his gaze fixed on the spot where the shuttle had disappeared. The wide shot pulled back, revealing the devastating battlefield stretching outward. The smoldering wrecks of AT-RTs, the still twitching forms of fallen Night Sisters, and the scattered Republic troops slowly, painfully regrouping. They had survived the encounter, but the revelation of Enoch hung in the air, a chilling omen of the depths of Thrawn's strategy. From the bridge of the Chimera, the battle unfolding across Dathomir's surface appeared not as chaos, but as a perfectly orchestrated performance. Grand Admiral Thrawn stood watching, his hands clasped behind his back, his red eyes missing no detail of the tableau below. The swirling storm clouds, shot through with veins of green lightning, provided a dramatic backdrop to the final movements of his symphony. The undead Night Sisters moved with their eerie, perfect synchronicity, a tide of resurrected fury, while his stormtroopers in their white and gold armor executed tactical withdrawals with machine-like precision. Every step back, every feigned collapse of a line, was a deliberate note in the composition. A familiar, worried voice crackled over the comm channel Thrawn was monitoring. "Luke, status?" Han Solo's voice was tight, straining against the interference. "Be careful," Princess Leia's voice cut in, her tone sharp with the General's intuition for deception. "They've got everything lined up. It feels too organized." On the surface, Luke Skywalker stood amidst the fading echoes of blaster fire, his green lightsaber still humming in his hand. He watched as the enemy lines dissolved with an unnerving lack of panic. "They're disengaging," he reported, his own senses tingling with profound unease. "It seems they are retreating." Back on the bridge, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Thrawn's lips. The bait had been taken, the performance believed. He stood surrounded by his inner circle, the three great mothers, their ancient forms humming with pent-up magic, and Enoch, a silent, armored sentinel whose presence was a promise of violence held in check. Thrawn activated a secure hololink to the surface. "The diversion is complete," he stated, his voice devoid of triumph, merely acknowledging a calculated outcome. "The New Republic has committed its strength to a barren rock. Begin the final phase." Below, on the war-torn plains of Dathomir, the very planet began to answer his call. The camera of perception, guided by Thrawn's will, saw what Republic senses were blinded to. In the areas most scarred by battle, where the ground had been torn asunder by turbo-laser fire and trampling feet, arcs of Viridian magic now swirled with new purpose. They coiled not around the dead, but around colossal buried stone fragments. At Thrawn's unspoken command, amplified by the collective will of the Great Mothers, the crust of Dathomir groaned in protest. Enormous sections of the cavern floor, miles across, were wrenched upward by tendrils of emerald energy. As the rock and soil sheared away, they revealed what had been slumbering beneath the surface for millennia, pitted, colossal metallic components of a design utterly alien to Imperial or Republic engineering. They were the bones of the Star Forge, a relic of the ancient, ravenous Rakatan Infinite Empire. This was always the goal, Thrawn said, his voice as calm and cold as the void between stars. Dathomir's deepest secret, hidden in plain sight, will now serve a purpose those in the New Republic's bloated bureaucracy could not possibly conceive. The Great Mothers raised their withered arms, their voices rising in a unified guttural chant that warped the air around the Chimera. On the surface, the colossal fragments of the Star Forge lifted into the storm-racked sky, moving with a terrifying, deliberate grace. They did not crash together, but merged with a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the Force itself, a sensation that made Luke Skywalker look up sharply, his celebration dying in his throat. Shimmering green energy welded the fragments, coalescing them into a single, massive, and terrifyingly incomplete structure, a partially rebuilt Star Forge. It hung in the atmosphere like a blasphemous second moon, its core pulsing with a nascent, ravenous power, a signal lost in the cacophony of the retreat and the planet's own dark signature. "You're right." Han's voice came through the comm again, this time buoyed by relieved excitement. "They are falling back. The skies are clearing." It was the final perfect misdirection. As the Republic forces began to tentatively cheer, believing they had won the day, the Great Mothers unleashed their ultimate expenditure of power. The green magic that had assembled the forge now swept outward, enveloping it and Thrawn's entire fleet in a shroud of pure illusion. To the naked eye and every sensor aboard the Republic ships, the enemy forces simply vanished. The Star Destroyers, the troop carriers, the monstrous half-formed Star Forge, all of it winked out of existence, leaving behind only the natural, if violent, storm of Dathomir. The surface below was suddenly, eerily silent and empty, save for the scorched earth, the discarded debris, and the dead. Luke and Ezra stood together, the sudden quiet pressing in on them. Around them, Republic troops leaned on their weapons, panting, their faces smeared with soot and dawning relief. The battle was, by all appearances, over. But Luke's face was grim, his eyes scanning the empty horizon where a fleet and a superweapon had just been. "Something," he whispered, his senses screaming into a void where a palpable dark presence had once roiled. "Something is missing. It's too quiet." Aboard the Chimera, now an invisible phantom ship, Thrawn stood before the main viewport. He did not look back at Dathomir, but forward, at the star-strewn path leading to the unknown regions and the Imperial stronghold of Bastion. Behind him, his ultimate prizes were secured. The silent, endless ranks of Night Sisters, the loyal, enhanced clones, and the means to build an armada beyond the New Republic's comprehension. He was not fleeing a defeat. He was advancing from a victory they were too blind to see. "The New Republic celebrates a victory they do not understand," Thrawn said, his final words on the matter cold and precise, a verdict handed down. "Let them revel in their hollow triumph. By the time they realize what was truly lost here today, I will be unstoppable." Admiral Pelion, standing silently by the viewport, finally spoke, his voice hushed with awe. How did you get this, Admiral? This magnitude of power?" Thrawn's red eyes fixed on the man, a rare, chilling hint of triumph in his voice. "Dathomir is a graveyard, Pelion. It is a world saturated with dark knowledge. The forgotten Rakatan Empire created a second Star Forge and, before their extinction, hid it deep within this planet's heart. Its shadow was disguised by the Night Sisters' magic, the perfect camouflage. This was the true prize.